If there's one thing every keyboard enthusiast seems to agree these days, is that high-quality custom mechanical keyboards are simply too expensive. But what if someone decided to buck the trend and offer a 65% layout keyboard with a simple and elegant design, hot-swappable switch sockets, VIA compatibility, USB-C in a variety of colors for a low price and without the need to join a group buy? Well, that is what NovelKeys has set out to do with the NK65 Entry Edition. And today, we're giving the IO-SAM treatment to this keyboard. Hello and welcome to IO-SAM. My name is Sam Franco, and this is a channel where I do tech reviews and show you how to build, fix, and mod all sorts of computer gear. Today, we'll take an in-depth look into NovelKeys' entry into the budget custom mechanical keyboards market with their hot-swappable 65% board, the NK65 Entry Edition. We'll go over its build, features, pros and cons, and by the time we're done, you should be able to decide if this is the budget custom keyboard for you. As usual, I will break everything into chapters in the description below with their respective time codes as well as their progress bars on the top and bottom of the screen to help you navigate to any specific part of this video. And yeah, I bought this one with my own money and all opinions here are my own, but I'd love to hear yours in the comment section below, of course. Alright, as we usually do things over here, let's just take some time to get some context and quickly go over how far the custom keyboard scene has come since the great mechanical keyboards renaissance of the late 2010s, and what does the term budget custom mechanical keyboard even means in early 2021? I guess we can all safely associate the beginning of GeekHack, the largest mechanical keyboards forum on the internet in 2007, with the birth of the custom mechanical keyboard hobby as we know today. And if you know anything about GeekHack, you know that it is predominantly the place where keyboard designers and enthusiasts announce their keyboards and keycaps designs and their respective group buys, and where they keep the community up to date on their progress. And if you know anything about group buys, you also know that custom keyboards and keycaps group buys are usually associated with some eye-watering prices. Those prices are a factor of basically three things: the constant pursuit of the highest quality and the most exquisite finishes possible for these keyboards, which usually involves metal machining, the low production volume nature of such endeavors, and the high level of craftsmanship required for some of these projects. The small batch side of these group buys and their effect on the final prices and shipping lead times common with these projects are reasonably easy to understand. Small production runs of a few dozen or even a few hundred keyboard cases simply do not justify the enormous prices for the types of molds required for mass production of keyboard parts. These molds are usually responsible for bringing the economies of scale that makes lower retail prices possible. As a result, these small batches of aluminum, brass, and other metal and resin parts are usually milled instead of cast or injected. And the CNC milling process of individual parts is significantly more inefficient, expensive, and time-consuming than the traditional processes of metal casting and plastic injection. But since the mechanical keyboards hobby explosion we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen some small vendors such as NovelKeys, Dixie Mac, soon to be Omnitype, the Key Company, KBD Fans, RamaWorks, and others start to gain size and to sell products in enough volume to allow them to finally start to venture into more capital-intensive and higher volume products that could be sold from inventory instead of the more common group buy schemes that we all love to hate. And the NK65 Entry Edition is the result of that effort by NovelKeys. The plan here is to offer a high-quality plastic-injected design that is accessible with multiple options of colors, a relatively low entry price, and an easy-to-use hot-swappable keyboard that is always in stock and that anyone can buy it, have it shipped immediately, and quickly built without having to solder switches. This is what Mike from NovelKeys said about his original plan for the first version of the NK65 on a conversation he had with the guys from Max on Deck in late 2019.
I thought there was a need in the community to have a high-quality cheap board. I also wanted it to be easy for any newcomers to come. So the two things that I really wanted, I wanted hot swap, and then I wanted it VIA compatible. I just wanted a good, cheap keyboard, one that you wouldn't be like, oh man, I scratched it. Be like, oh, okay, I scratched it, whatever, you know, like this is my daily driver. This is my Honda Civic of keyboards.
Sounds good, right? Yeah, well, not so fast there, Mike. As it is often the case, reality has the habit of always complicating a good and simple idea. So despite the Herculean efforts made by Mike and the NovelKeys team to produce as many of these boards as they could afford to make, hoping to have a big stash of these in stock throughout the year, 2020 brought along with its extensive bag of tricks the unexpected demand explosion for computer peripherals in general, and custom keyboards in particular.
We did the original run of the NK65 in unlimited group buy, and we ended up selling about 300 boards. I think I bought 400, and then we sold the other 100 at a different time. And it sold. It was whatever. Like, even the extras from the first one, I think were up for a couple hours. Did sell out of those, and then I started working on the next round. And one of the parts that took so long is that we were working on the injection molding part of it, so the entry edition. And then I went ahead and I placed my order, and I ordered 3 times the amount of what we sold in the first unlimited group buy. And so I sent one to Nathan, I sent you guys a couple, and I sent Bad Seed Tech, Brian, the other Brian. So my initial plan is I was going to have these shipped by air, but they had to be shipped by sea because air shipping was delayed and also 4 times as expensive as it was before. So all these videos and reviews were coming out about the NK65 before I was even getting the product in. It got way more hype than I thought it would. Anyways, I list them up for sale. It goes live. The site is just like crawling. People aren't able to check out. And there's nothing I can do in that, like it's up, people are just swarmed on the website, smashing F5, trying to get in. Sell out of the entry edition in 40 seconds.
That was Mike recounting the hurdles of launching the NK65 Entry Edition when he talked with Brian and Jay from Top Clack in August of 2020. As a result, the always in stock part of the plan so far has not materialized yet, since every single batch of these boards that NovelKeys has restocked until now have instantly sold out. But supply and demand for these boards will eventually equalize as the supply chains around the world start to go back to normal sometime in 2021, so we can at least have the reassurance that at some point NK65 Entry Editions, as well as the similarly priced boards about to be released by other vendors, will become easier to buy. But you know what part of NovelKeys' plan for this product worked out just fine? The part about making a damn good keyboard for $95. The NK65 comes in 2 editions, the Aluminum Edition in 3 colors and the Entry Edition in 5 colors. But the NovelKeys has promised to bring even more color options in the next few months. Both are hot swappable and use the exact same PCB and have the same aluminum plate. The one we're reviewing today is the Entry Edition, which in my humble opinion is actually the most interesting option here. Not because the Aluminum Edition is not good, but instead because the Entry Edition is not only the more affordable one, but also the most unique product in the newborn budget-friendly custom keyboards market. The $185 Aluminum Edition, while a really nice keyboard in its own merits, has plenty of competition from KBD fans, and it's mostly in stock entry-level boards. Not to mention the upcoming Glorious GMMK Pro that is arriving sometime in early 2021 for around $170, which you can bet that I'll review as soon as it comes out, of course. Subscribe if you don't want to miss that one. My copy of the Entry Edition came in this lovely opaque beige color that gives this oh so classy vintage look that I'm a big sucker for. But choosing the opaque color ended up having some advantages I was not expecting, but we'll get to that later. In the box, you get the keyboard in this gorgeous looking hard shell case, an old style coiled USB-C cable, which reminds me of old school keyboards and even those corded phones of the 70s and 80s. Yes kids, corded phones used to be a thing. But of course, don't confuse the included coiled cable with what people immediately associate with custom coiled cables these days. This is not that. But regardless, I still appreciate the included cable for what it is, which is way nicer than 99% of cables we get included with production keyboards these days. You also get a little card reminding you that this board is VIA compatible, which we'll also take a look later. The layout of choice here was 65%, which has become the most popular layout for small form factor keyboards recently, given the totally acceptable trade-off of having one extra column in exchange for having some navigation keys and the arrows cluster. It also has 3 1U sized keys, U here standing for unit, between the 6.25U spacebar and the arrows keys, which is something some people will like and some will not. In my case, I would have preferred a 1.25U alt and function keys for easier keycaps compatibility, and to be easier to find the arrows keys without looking down into the keyboard, but this is not a deal breaker to me. And because this keyboard has a hot swappable PCB, you cannot change anything about the layout, of course, so you get what you get. The keyboard measures 32 centimeters in width, 11 centimeters in depth, 3.5 centimeters in height in the taller backside, and 2 centimeters in the shorter lower side. It has a fixed 7-degree typing inclination angle, which cannot be changed since the board has no adjustable feet. But that has not been a problem for me since the default angle feels pretty natural to my typing position. Although a wrist rest is highly recommended here, given its relatively high profile. I got this beautiful Japanese Philco branded Manila Tamil wood palm rest from mechanicalkeyboards.com for $39, which fits 65% boards perfectly. Besides, the light wood color was a perfect match to the beige color of my NK65. The board weighs a hefty 836 grams, or 1 pound and 13.5 ounces, with switches and thick ABS keycaps already installed. So while this keyboard is not exactly heavy, it certainly feels heavy for its small size. The build quality of this keyboard is, at least for my copy, very good. I'd say that the texture of the polycarbonate used here, plus the wedge design and its straight lines, contribute to the overall feel of good quality and elegant design. And talking about the polycarbonate, I've seen a few reviewers mentioning that their boards came with little cracks and defects in the inner areas where the screws attached to the plate. While these defects didn't necessarily compromise the structure of the board, they were a big enough problem for NovelKeys to start revising their subsequent batches to avoid having the screws tighten too much to the point of causing the plastic to break. My copy was part of their second batch and does not have any cracks anywhere that I could find. But I'm not sure if this was the result of an updated manufacturing process or if the opaque polycarbonate of my beige color keyboard is less brittle than the translucent ones that all those other reviewers were using and thus less prone to cracks. And as far as the structure goes, this board is tough. It might be plastic, but it has almost no flex or creaks. This is almost on the same level of quality of classic Leopold and Philco boards that I think are made of thick ABS plastic and are also built like tanks. It also has 2 thick rubber strips that run the length of the board to ensure it doesn't slip on your desk. One of the most interesting features of this board is the addition of a super thick silicone pad under the PCB. This thing is massive and gives the board a lot of its weight. So in a sense, it serves 2 purposes: to damp the reverberation of any ping or rattling noises, as well as to cancel any hollow sounds inside the board, and to give it some additional heft. Together with the long rubber feet at the bottom, it will not move on your desk. If you're using a desk mat like I do, this thing is not going anywhere. As for the actual design of the board, it is straight lines everywhere, and I am perfectly happy with that. Now, I know looks are very subjective, of course, but at least in my aesthetics, these sharp lines look really cool, which I'm sure also contributed somewhat to make this board cheaper to manufacture, given the lack of structural complexity. It is a nice mix of old and new that should feel perfectly at home in any desk setup, regardless if you get one with a translucent or opaque colors. Oh, and yeah, I'm aware of the similarity between this board's outer design and the KBD Fans Tofu 65. But the similarities are only on the outside, since the NK65 is not a regular tray mount design like the Tofu. The NK65 uses a very interesting mounting system, which is what NovelKeys calls a modified top mount, where the plate screws into the top case, the PCB screws into the plate, and the plate screws into the bottom case through holes on the PCB. This, in theory, allows the PCB to hang from the plate by only 2 screws, giving it a bit more flexibility. This design mixed the advantages of a top mount system with a bit of the simplicity of a tray mount one, while allowing for no visible screws once assembled, which is pretty clever. As a result, the typing feel on this plate mounting mechanism is indeed very good. It does not give you the super bouncy feel of gasket mounts that people have been losing their minds over recently, but it does offer a bit more flex and thus a bit more cushioning on the bottom out in the center area of the board than what you get on a regular tray mount keyboard, with the silicone pad providing a soft backstop to the PCB so it doesn't flex too much. So you get a softer typing feel, a nicer sound since the shock absorption also helps to reduce pings and rattles, all without having a plate that feels flimsy, like some other designs that can sometimes feel like their PCBs are going to touch the bottom of the case. When I separated the top and the bottom halves of this keyboard, I saw no reason to detach the PCB from the plate or the plate from the top half of the case, since this is not needed to access the stabilizers. Speaking of stabilizers, these are plate mounted, and NovelKeys claims these are cherry plate mounts, but it is not clear to me if this means that they are just cherry style or if they are actually manufactured by Cherry. But whatever the case, the included stabs are not exactly great. They come slightly lubed, but not enough to avoid rattling. So modding or replacing these are a must if you really want this board to sound its best. As for it being plate mounted, I know this is another thing that people love to complain about, especially with hot swap boards, since most enthusiasts would have preferred PCB screw-in stabs. But NovelKeys' decision is understandable in this context. Since this board is designed to be ready to go, meaning you're only supposed to add your switches and keycaps and be off to the races, the board has to come completely assembled, unlike most other custom keyboard kits. Now, while they could have shipped the board completely assembled with PCB screw-in stabs, that would have forced them to sell this board with impeccably factory-tuned stabs to ensure users wouldn't have the urge to unscrew the whole board to access the stabs and then tune them. But considering who NovelKeys customers are, you know many of them would end up wanting to retune and improve the stabs themselves anyway, right? The problem with selling this board with pristine factory-tuned stabs would be how expensive that would be. It would be a manufacturing challenge big enough to prevent NovelKeys from selling this board for less than $100. And I'm sure they did everything they could to not go over the $100 mark. So, putting plate mount stabs means that anyone can easily remove the stabs and tune them to their heart's content without the need to unscrew the whole board apart, and thus reducing the number of potential customer support issues that would certainly arise if most people were disassembling these keyboards everywhere. And yes, of course I'm going to show you how to mod the stabs of this keyboard. Hey, this is IOSam, it's what I do here. But before we do that though, let's go over a couple more things. The PCB is one of the major highlights of this board. This is a young card design, and it is a thing of beauty. Super nice layout with beautifully drawn traces for the weirdos who actually appreciate these things like me. It uses Scale hot swap sockets and a ST Microelectronics 32-bit ARM controller. And because it's 2021 already, we have, thankfully, a USB-C port here, although it is on the right side of the board, which I know is guaranteed to displease a lot of people. Another hugely positive thing here is that the switch sockets are compatible with PCB-mounted switches, meaning they already come with the 2 extra holes required for that. So here you won't have to clip the 2 extra prongs from your PCB-mounted switches, which is awesome. It has per-key RGB illumination that can be programmed directly on the keyboard or through QMK or the VIA software interface, which we're going to cover in a bit. And I gotta say, the SMD RGB implementation here is really good. But of course, because the switch's orientation is south-facing, you'll be restricted in your ability to use shine-through keycaps here. Since most backlit keycaps have their characters in the top of the key, this means you get pretty much no light coming through, especially if you're using opaque switches, such as the Glorious Pandas I have here. The only option for south-side transparent legends that I could ever find are the ones that have side legends, and you'd have to use translucent switches for that to work as well. But this is not everyone's cup of tea, of course. So, if backlit keycaps is a top priority for your build, this might not be the keyboard for you. On the other hand, if you have been already pulled into the black hole of premium keycaps, which are almost always opaque anyway, then you probably don't care about backlighting. Although I have to say that having RGB glow under opaque keycaps can actually look pretty nice when working under dimmer lights. But then, it is more for aesthetics than anything practical really. And then we have the other main protagonist here, the ability to program this board through QMK and VIA. If there is one thing on the top of the wish list of every keyboard enthusiast I ever met, this would be it. And for a good reason. QMK compatibility means you can actually completely reprogram your keyboard and create and modify multiple layers. And VIA compatibility means you can also do it instantly, using an easy-to-use graphical interface by just selecting the key you want to program, the function you want it to execute, and then saving it. It couldn't be any easier, really. In the case of the NK65, you can create up to 4 different layers of characters and macros. I have the 2 default layers that already came pre-programmed, and then created a third layer on top of those. I also assigned the third LED light to indicate when the third layer is active. You can also configure the RGB lights through QNK and VIA as well. Although it is pretty easy to program the per key RGB by just using the commands on the keyboard itself, the ones accessible on the default second layer. But the best thing about VIA is that once you're done programming your keyboard, you can just close the VIA GUI and your keyboard will keep the new settings. No need to have a memory-hungry app running in the background at all times. And that, my friends, is priceless. For this review, I outfitted my NK65 with the fully lubed Glorious Panda that I recently reviewed on my Holy Panda Wars video, that you can check on the link I'll leave on the description below and on the card up here. If you want to find out how did I fix the infamous Glorious Panda leaf spring tick noise that everybody complains about,
like the pinging's bad. Do you guys hear the ping?
you should definitely check my previous Holy Pandas video. For keycaps, I chose two sets to run the typing test on. A thick ABS double shot set from EPBT in the Doge color that I got from the Key.company for $79 plus shipping, and a thick PBT dye sublimated set from Drop from their Artifact Bloom series, which was a bit of a bargain for $45 plus shipping in the black on white color. So this way you'll be able to hear any difference in sound between the two types of plastic should you decide to use ABS or PBT sets with this board. Alright, first let's take a listen to the sound with the stock stabilizers. Yep, those stock stabs are atrocious. So, to fix the stabs, I decided to replace the ones included with the NK65 for some GMK plate-mounted ones I bought from Drop.com's surplus site called Yumbo's Closet earlier in 2020 for $12 a set. Then I did the same modification I did on another hot swap board that also used plate-mounted stabs, my Silent Glorious GMMK build, which you can also check out in the link I'm leaving in the description below and on the card on the top of the screen. After disassembling the stabs, I clipped not only the two small flexible legs out of the stems, but also the larger legs to make the stabs silent also on the upstroke. Then I used the same 50-50 mix of Krytox 205 grade 2 grease and Krytox 105 oil that I used to lube my switches to lube the stabilizer stems, inner housings, and wire. And then dipped the tips of the wires in some dielectric grease. I had people asking me before, why do I use dielectric grease on the wire tips instead of just using Krytox? And my answer is simply because dielectric grease is way cheaper than Krytox, while having the perfect consistency to mute any rattling. Besides, you have to use quite a lot of lube on this part of the wire, so again, if you're using Krytox, that can get expensive very quickly. But if Krytox prices are not a concern to you, then you surely can use it on the wire tips instead of the dielectric grease. After lubing all the parts, just reassemble everything back, sliding the wires through the housing into the bottom square hole of the stem, and then snapping the wire into the housing channel. I also cleaned up the remaining lube residue from the stock stabilizers on the PCB and the plate with some cotton swabs and isopropyl alcohol. To silence the stabs bottom out, I used silicone adhesive non-slip grips for quilt templates, these round little soft stickers between the PCB and the stabs, instead of using the more common Band-Aid mod. This is not necessarily better than Band-Aid cloth, but it is just a bit easier and cleaner to use than those. And finally, it was time to reinstall all the stabs and switches, and then put the keycaps back in place. Now, let's take a listen to the modded NK65 Entry Edition with tuned aftermarket GMK stabs. I gotta say, this little board can sound really nice if you take the time to mod its stabilizers. Alright, so what do I think about the NK65 Entry Edition? Well, I like it. In fact, I like it a lot. For pricing and availability, we all know the drill by now. This is still difficult to get your hands on. But NovelKeys has restocked this board in different colors a few times since they launched it, and every time they do, they seem to bring them in larger numbers. So there is reason to be optimistic that they will be able to eventually settle the pent-up demand for this board later in 2021, and that Mike's dream of offering his Honda Civic of keyboards to anyone who wants to buy one might actually come true. Now for pricing, I don't think anyone would disagree that $95 plus shipping is a pretty good price for a keyboard of this level of quality and features. I know some people will claim that you can buy entire mechanical keyboards with switches and keycaps for less than this, as I'll have a board like that here myself in the channel in the next few days. But it is important to remember that the NK65, while an entry-level keyboard, is still an enthusiast product with features you could not even dream of getting for less than $250 US until very recently. So I have to commend NovelKeys here for pushing the sub $100 price boundary, despite some of the logistical and accounting related challenges that they had in the last year.
How has the US-China tariff situation affected things for you?
It made things cost more. So I remember, I was watching the news and I heard about it. And I was like, oh, okay, that's gonna suck, And they were just talking about it, and then it was a week later. I logged into our bank account and I was like, oh, what the heck is this? And we got hit instantly with the 25%. So it was It was awful.
To give a realistic cost expectation for a full build using the NK65 Entry Edition as the basis, let's break down the final bill for the one I've put together here. I paid $57.97 for 2 packs of Glorious Panda switches. I buy my keyboard lubricants in bulk, but I'll consider $15 for the average cost for one keyboard, which is what you pay on average to buy 2 to 5 grams of Krytox 205 grade 0 on most online stores, plus a small 9 grams tube of Permatex dielectric grease. $91 for the Enjoy PBT Dolce Double Shot ABS Cherry keycap set that I got from the Key.company. Although you could save yourself some money if you go with the really nice drop Artifact Bloom black on white PBT set I showed before for $50 with shipping already included, $14.50 for GMK plate mounted stabilizers, and $100.27 for the NK65 Entry Edition kit. This brings the total cost of this build to $278.74, with all taxes and shipping fees for all the parts already included. Naturally, you can spend less than I did, depending on your choices of switches and keycaps, but I'd say $250 US is a good ballpark figure to build a decent board around the NK65 Entry Edition. Now, the typing feel and sound of this keyboard. Sure, it's not perfect out of the box. As you heard it in the typing test, you need to mod the stabs on this guy for it to really shine. But then, you should probably never expect to find any keyboard that comes with perfectly tuned stabs for this kind of money anyway. And of course, a lot of the typing feel and sound will largely depend on the switches and keycaps you choose to install in this keyboard. But at least the case and the PCB here will hold their end of the bargain in the equation. So, at the end of the day, at least you can rest assured that as long as you're willing to put up the work to mod its stabilizers, you have the best typing and sounding enthusiast entry-level keyboard kit that $100 can buy in early 2021, bar none. Which brings us to our competitive analysis. At this point in early 2021, I don't think you can find another sub $100 enthusiast level kit with this level of quality, features, and ease of use. You can find some cheaper decent boards out there, sure, such as the 60% and TKL sized bare bones Glorious GMMK, for example, that I used on my silent office keyboard I mentioned a few minutes ago. But those don't offer the same level of enthusiast features of the NK65. And while other vendors are coming with competing entry-level boards, such as the Portico from the Key.company and the Bauer Light from Dixie Mac, soon to be Omnitype, even those will cost north of $100 for their base kits. So it seems that, at least for now, the NK65 Entry Edition will sit in a very comfortable position in this market for a little while. In my keyboard segment's market scale, where I usually break both the large-scale production boards into mass market, value, performance, and premium, and the custom segment into entry-level, luxury, and over-the-top, I'd say that even though the NK65 Entry Edition costs less than some premium-level mass production keyboards, I can comfortably place it in the custom segment's entry level. So here we have, again, my favorite type of product, the type that punches above its weight and gives you a very good cost-benefit ratio while requiring minimal modifications before they can hit peak performance. And that, my friends, is what this channel is all about. And as we close this video, if you made all the way here, please accept my most sincere thank you for sticking with me on this journey to build a different kind of tech YouTube channel, one where products are analyzed in depth and where we'll always focus on how to get the best bang for your buck. And as usual, if you liked what you saw here, please remember to leave the good old thumbs up on your way out. That is always super helpful. If you enjoyed this type of content, please make sure you subscribe. If you want to see more in-depth gear reviews and DIY projects like these, always with a keen eye on the budget side of things, you should definitely stay tuned to this channel. Thank you again, and see you all soon.